Hi, and welcome to our webinar on imports. In this session, we'll go through a few things, starting with explaining in a little detail what import options you should use and what imports go where. We'll then go through the formatting checklist for data files and reasons errors may occur. And finally, we'll demonstrate to you a few different imports and show you how to sort through any errors which arise from these. So let's start with what import goes where. If you're looking to import people data in bulk to Bob, you can do this in the People module within the Imports tab. You will see that 3 different options exist here for an import. So we'll start from the top. We'll start with Import People first. If you're creating profiles for new hires and adding new people's records for the very first time to Bob, the option you want to select is Import People. In order to create a profile for the very first time, there's some required information you must provide for each employee you're looking to register in the import sheet. This is usually company work email, first name, last name, start date, and site. If you need to access a template for this import, simply click on the Import People button like we've just done and download our employee data template from the bottom of the pop-up window. Great, okay, so next we'll look at updating people. Once you've created records for your new employees or existing employees, if you're migrating your people data into Bob for the very first time, you should use the Update People option if you would like to import more information to each person's profile to then build this out. Again, a template is available for you to access by clicking on Update People and downloading the spreadsheet from the bottom of the pop-up window. You can use the Update People import option if you're looking to add information to any field in the employee profile which does not sit within a table format in Bob and is therefore in a column and does not have an effective date attached to this information. Let's just take a look at the employee profile for a little more detail on this. One big benefit of using the Update People import is that you can customize the template spreadsheet to include as many fields which need populating in Bob as you want. For example, we can simultaneously update somebody's personal mobile number, which lives in the personal contact details category in Bob, their passport number, which lives in identification section in Bob, their gender, which is a field found in the home section, and their emergency contact information also found in the emergency section, and so on. So all of these you can add to one template and upload all at the same time using the Update People option. You can also import information to any custom fields you've created in Bob in the same way. Just make sure the spreadsheet that you're using has a column named the same name as what you've called your custom field in Bob. As you can see here, we've got one as an example called custom field. So let's just jump back to the imports section in Bob, and we'll talk you through the update table. So the last import option you'll see is the update table one. You'll need to use this option if you're looking to import information to Bob which sits within a table format. If you're not sure what sits within a table format in Bob, simply use the drop down next to the Update Table Import button to check. So examples of some of the tables in Bob are address, work, right to work, salary and employment history, variable pay, etc. So we're quickly just going to jump back to the employee profile and take a closer look at some of those tables. Use the Update Table Import option if you'd like to import data which has an effective date attached to it. This means you need to know on what date a change to this information occurred. For example, as you can see here, we can include a row in the work table to import information on people's job title changes, department moves, or promotions, which all happened on a certain date. Let's jump back to the import page now. So select your table from the drop-down, click on, let's look at that in more detail. So download the template for each relevant table, as you can see by selecting the table in the drop-down, clicking Update Table, and then download the sheet from the bottom of the pop-up window. If you've created and added custom columns to your tables in Bob, just add these columns to the template spreadsheet you would have just downloaded, making sure the names match, and import as normal. Please note when importing data to tables, you can include more than one row per person. If you're importing any historical changes to work or salary or employment, for example, and you have the effective dates for each time a change took place. Now we'll move on to looking at what do common import errors look like. Just going to pull up my spreadsheet. So a lot of the import errors you might encounter are usually a result of your data not meeting the formatting guidelines. Many of these are captured in the formatting checklist found in the very first tab of every import template you can download from Bob. So a few example errors will have error messages such as employee not found, employee can't report to himself, effective date missing, etc. So let's take a closer look at one of the checklists for more details. So make sure all dates are in the correct format you have specified in your site settings. So the default on Bob is always date, month, and year using the European standard. But if you're creating a US site, for example, which uses month, date, year, make sure all the dates in your spreadsheet follow that same formatting. Make sure to format the cells of the sheet before import. So date format for dates, text for phone numbers so the 0 doesn't appear, etc. Make sure all historical data has an effective date for each row. As we've just talked about, these will be important when you're updating table information. Make sure all employees are older than 16 if you are importing birth dates. Make sure emails are consistent throughout the file. So if you're registering a profile with a certain work email address, make sure you're using that same email address when you're updating people's data so you can match up the profile with the relevant information. Make sure there are no special characters in emails. At the moment, Bob can't support these. Make sure all mandatory fields are filled out, and usually you'll know which ones these are because they're marked with a red asterisk. Make sure that there are users for all employees in their respective reports to column of the work table, except for the CEO and other such positions which needs to appear at the top of the organizational chart. And make sure to fill in the reports to field in order for the org chart to be accurate and to become built out in the hierarchy structure that you're used to. Make sure the reports to is the email of the direct manager and not just their name. Make sure not to write NA or empty fields or 0 or any other value which isn't what you want imported in the sheet. Just leave it empty. Otherwise, NA or 0 or whatever else you've put in there will be imported to those fields in Bob. Make sure there are no blank spaces before characters because, again, the blank space will be imported to a field in Bob if you have those blanks. Make sure there are no hidden columns because, as you'll see in a second, you'll have to match these columns up. Make sure custom fields or columns are added in the tab that you're importing related to the section in Bob that you are updating, just to make the imports easier for yourself. Make sure custom columns are in the most logical table. So whether you're adding something to the work table or employment, for example, thinking about where it would be most relevant. And make sure terminology of custom field names or data that you're adding to Bob makes sense for employees. And finally, make sure there's a valid employee ID if you are importing this. So no letters, just numbers, and make sure there's no mix up between employee ID and national ID. So now let's try a few imports and see what kind of errors we get and how to clean them up.
Thank you. So let's do our first import. So I go back to the import section, and I want to import now employees for the very first time. So as we mentioned before, we go to import people section. I click here, and I can whether drag and drop our file, or I can just look for it in my computer. So I look for it in my computer. I click here. This is my file. I click open and upload. Now, as you can see, my file contains various tabs, and Bob will ask me which tabs would I want to start with. So I'm starting with Employee Basic. Here you see I need to choose the correct tab, so I click Employee Basic and next. Now, I need to make sure that all of my values are matched according to Bob. So I can see here that everything is okay, but I have a red asterisk under the field of site. So let's click on it and see what I need to do and what I need to match. My site here, London, New York, and Tel Aviv, are different than the site within Bob, because within Bob I have the word demo that is missing. So in order to match them, I just need to drag and drop the relevant values in here, and now everything is matched. I click done, and I see that I have these all over, which means that I'm good to go. Click on next, and I see that 14 people were successfully imported, and I have one error. I can see my error here, or I can just download the error sheet to see what happened. And I can see here in my sheet that valid email required. That's my error description, meaning that I have an issue, I have an error in my email that I just tried to upload. I can see that John Smith, I have an issue that I didn't put a dot here. I forgot. So I put the dot. Now the email looks good. I click on save, and I want to upload again John Smith because Bob weren't able to create it all over. So I go back to the import file. I go to import people, just like I did for the very first time. And now I want to drag and drop my error sheet. I don't want to go to the main sheet that I just updated. I wanted to go to the error sheet because I saved my changes here, and I only want to create John Smith. So what I do, I just drag and drop my file here, and my file is being progressed. I want to make sure everything's matched. I don't want to match the error description, of course. I keep it unmatched, and I click next. And John Smith was created as well. Now that I've created the first batch, so I created the employees for the first time, I want to update some information about them. So I'll go to update current employees info. I click on update people. Again, I will find the file in my computer. Here's my file. I click on open, upload. My file is being progressed. Now I need to, again, choose the relevant tab. I want to choose update people. That is my relevant tab. And now I need to check what will be my identifier. We always recommend to use email address as the identifier, because two people in the same organization can have the same name, but they cannot have the same email address. So in order to make sure we won't have any mistakes, I always choose email. I click on next. And now let's see if I need to adjust anything. Yes, everything is correct except the nationality. Let's see what we have in the nationality. Okay, so here we can see that in my sheet, I created nationality using the name of the country. In Bob, they're using, instead of USA, they're using American. We always recommend, in order to ensure your data integrity, always to match your values to the ones that we have in Bob in order to avoid any duplicates in your reports. So if you have some employees with American nationality and some employees with USA nationality, it will look like you have more nationalities than you actually have. So we always recommend you to try and look for the relevant value. So I match, instead of USA, American, instead of UK, British, instead of Italy, Italian. And I also want to make sure that we don't have any spelling mistakes. So instead of Argentina, let's write Argentinian. And I click on done. Now I can see that everything is matched correctly, and I want to continue and import my sheet. Okay, 4 people were successfully imported, but I have 11 mistakes. Let's export my arrow, and we can see it here. Okay, so we can see here that first of all, I have an issue with John Smith. Employee not found. We already know this error, so I just put a dot here. Here I have another one, that invalid social security number. We know that social security number, the format is 3 numbers, 2 numbers, and then 4 numbers. Here I forgot number, so Bob cannot recognize it. We have to make sure that everything is correct, so I put a number that I forgot. Now is 324. Again, invalid social security number. As we mentioned before, we cannot respect 0. If they don't have social security number here, it is absolutely fine, but we can just leave it empty. So let's delete all the zeros, and let's see if I have anything else. Employee must be older than 16. Here we see that we got mistaken in Kristen's birthday, because we said that she was born in 2006. It cannot be possible that she's younger than 16, so I change it accordingly, and I am saving my file. I go back into my import page, and I want to update again my people. So these are all people that I weren't able to update before because I had error. So I'm making sure that my file is saved, and I am dragging, I'm dragging and dropping it here. Again, I want to make sure that I dragged the arrow file and not my original file. I use my email as my identifier. I click on next, and I see that everything is matched, and I don't want to match the error description. I click import, I am sure, and 11 people were successfully updated. Great. Now, I want to show you how to update table data. So we will go as an example for the work section, and I want to update a work table. I click on import table. Again, I have already the template, but if I need a template and I need to start from fresh, I just click here and get the template and trying to fill it in. Or if I already have it, I click on upload and uploading my template. Upload. I want to choose the tab of work history. Click on next. I use email as my identifier, and I want to make sure everything is matched. I can see that again I have the red asterisk next to the site. So I click on the site, and I will match it again. So I have New York, London, and Tel Aviv. I click on done. Import, I'm sure. Okay, I have 6 arrows. Let's see what are my arrows. I will export the arrows. Okay, so I can see John Smith again. We all know this arrow. I just need to put another dot. Here I have employee not found. So here I have in the reports to section. I look at the reports to section and I see that I have an NA. We cannot leave NA. We have to leave this empty. If they don't have someone a direct report, it's fine. We just need to delete it and keep it empty. And also we see that we have another issue with Zoe Zohario. So in our original file, I can show you that. In our original file, in the employee basic, I don't have Zoe Zohario here. I didn't create her user. That's why we cannot create her as a report to. What we need to do, we need to make sure we create a user for Zoe Zohario first, using the employee basic sheet, and only then we can import again the work table in order to put her as a manager of someone. So for now, I delete Zoe Zohario, and I will need to go through, create her as a user, and then do it again. Here, John Smith, again, we have the same issue that we keep forgetting to put a dot. And employee cannot report to himself. So Kathy Page cannot report to Kathy Page. If Kathy Page is the CEO or the manager of the organization, we just need to keep it empty. So as we mentioned before, we need to keep in mind that everyone in the organization needs to have someone they report to, because Bob built the organizational structure automatically based on the reports to field. If someone doesn't have a direct manager, Bob would put this person in the top of the org chart. So they will assume that this person is the CEO or the manager of the organization. Only the CEO and the manager of the organization needs to keep it empty. All the rest has to have reports to. So let's save it. We know what all our mistakes were. So we save it. We go back here to Bob. I go again to the work section. I click on import table, and I am dragging and dropping my error sheet after I saved it. My file is being processed. I choose email as my identifier. I click on next. I want to make sure that everything's matched other than the error description, and I click on import. Yes, I'm sure. 6 people were successfully updated. Great. Now I want to show you what we're doing in case that we want to create our own field. We want to add another field to the work section. So you can see here that I have all the information about the work history, but after we did organizational change, or we just forgot, or we want to add something else, so we want to add another field that is not part of Bob's default field. It's something that we have in our organization. So I don't need to fill in again all the information. I can just add the field that I want to add, and making sure that the effective date matches the effective date that I have here. So I'll go to Bob, and I'll go to settings, and then employee fields. Now I want to go to the work section, and as you can see here, I have the fields that do not require any effective date. So these fields I can update according through the update people, and here I have all the fields that are inside the table because they are connected to an effective date. And I want to add another field here. So I click on the 3 dots, add a new column, and my column is job family. I just copy it into here, and I want to choose it as a list. I can add a description. I can choose for this field to be only connected to a specific site, and I can put here the values that will be under this list, but right now I want to keep it empty. I click on save, and I go back to the import page. And as I mentioned, I want to go to the work section, and I want to import a work table. I click on here. I want to select it from my computer. Okay, upload. Now I want to choose my last tab. Click on next. The email will be my identifier as usual. And I can see here that I have the red asterisk. Let's see why. I click here, and I have here the values that I didn't create. So I want to make sure that Bob will create those values under my list. So I just click, because I don't have any options, I didn't create any options under the list. I just click on next, and then Bob creates those values automatically. next time I would want to do another upload for different people or for the same people, all those categories will be created already because I just created them, so I can match them. I click on done, and I can see that everything is okay. I click on import. Yes, I'm sure. And 15 people were successfully updated. That's all. So we looked at 3 examples, one for uploading people for the very first time, then updating the information about those people, and then adding a work table for them. So right now we looked at work, but every other table works exactly the same. So if I want to upload employment or salary table, everything works exactly the same. Now we will have time for questions.
You'll see in the console for the GoToWebinar panel that there is a section that you can input questions into. So feel free to input any questions that you have from the session so far. No questions so far. Oh, we've just had a question come through. Just give me a moment to read. So we have a question here about uploading options with a multi-list field type. So the question is, when creating a list for a multi-list, is it possible to bulk upload what you want to have on the list?
Hey, I'll take this one. Yes, absolutely. Just make sure that when you're creating that column in your spreadsheet, you list all the values that you need ticked as part of the multi-list, but after each one, put a comma and then a space. So for example, value 1, comma, space, value 2, comma, space. So we'll just show you. Exactly. And if the field that you've created that's a custom field is a multi-list type, then all of those values, the art, craft, and nature, would be ticked for that person's record for job family.
Great. Thank you so much, Desi, for answering that question. Our next question is, could you please go through to show us where you're downloading the templates again?
Sure. So if you're downloading templates to import people for the very first time, click on the option, and then you'll see at the bottom, employee data. And then if you just pull the template, you'll see it pulls up with all the possible fields that you can do when creating a profile for the very first time. And you'll also see all of the fields to the left that are marked as required. So you'll need to make sure these are filled out in order to create a profile in Bob. And then if you scroll again to the right to the end of that template, you'll see the option to add a custom field with some short instructions on sort of figuring out what type of field it needs to be. So that will prompt you to then create it in Bob under the right format, and then you upload the data as relevant.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for answering that question, Desi. Our next question is, does Bob not recognize the changes that you made to the original table? So we saw multiple times the issue with the dot in the email for John Smith. Can you just confirm why that wasn't recognized off the bat?
Yes, of course. So the first time that we tried to create a record for John Smith, when we tried to import that file, obviously in our original sheet where we've kind of got a master file, the dot was missing. So we then went and corrected and made that that update in our error sheet, and we re-imported the error sheet, but we hadn't gone back to the master sheet to then correct John Smith's email in every single other tab that we were completing imports for. So the system every time was saying, hey, where is that email pointing to in Bob? So this is why every single time we kept having that error, because the original master sheet that we were using to import, it had a mistake every single time in every single sheet. So that's why we encourage for you to make sure your data is as clean as possible before you're completing imports.
Great, thank you so much for confirming that one for us, Desi. I've got another question here, and somebody is asking about when they're importing something new to the work table. So if they're creating a new row in the work table, let's say with a custom, they've created a custom column to that work table, and they're backdating the change, and they're using a past effective date. Why is it not updating onto the current effective date? Can you confirm that for us?
Yes, so you have to make sure that, for example, let's work with this job family example. When I'm importing just this information, for example, it's gonna import that value to the row that has effective date. So for example, if I'm looking at John Smith, his effective date is the 1st of May 2020, and the value I have for the 1st of May 2020 for John's work table is art, craft, and nature. So if I want to import data for a row in John's table that has a value, that has an effective date of something in the past, I have to create a new row in the work history table. And then add the date that I'm trying to import that information to for that row. And then fill in the value that I would need for that effective date, if that makes sense. So I'm essentially uploading information to historical rows. So I have to make sure that I've got the effective date of when that historical change happened.
Great, thank you so much for that. Let me just see if there are any other questions that have come through. It seems like we might have answered all the ones that have come through. All right, I'll give it another second in case there's any last minute questions. Please feel free to send any in that you might have. If you don't have any questions right now, but think of one later on, please feel free to reach out to support@hibob.com to ask your questions, or you can reach us on the in-app chat, and you can ask any other follow-up questions that you might have. So no more questions have come through. So I just want to thank everybody for their time today. And I want to thank as well Aviv and Desi for their wonderful presentation and taking us all through imports. All right, we'll close it off for today. Have a wonderful rest of the day, everybody. And thanks again for attending.